Hey guys, Christopher here. I'm going to review these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows action figures. We're going to start with packaging. There's really nothing to say. I mean, they're pretty simple. There's some slight differences between the two. Like this one has all four turtles. Kind of wish they would have put Krang up there. And that one has Leo. So there's that. And then they had these little app stickers on them, which they were at least kind enough to move them to the sides so that, they're not in the way of seeing the figures through the clear plastic, which is, kind of cool of them. They don't have anything on the sides of the boxes, but they do have this image on the backs, and it's identical with these two, so I'd imagine it's identical across the board. But it just shows you the other figures in the set, which they have quite a few, I mean, it looks pretty cool. It's basic. There's nothing to complain about. So let's go ahead and open these things up. So I was able to open up these packages, and I'm going to go ahead and start with Krang and his android. So starting off actually with Krang, if you go ahead and take a look, he doesn't really have a sculpt so much as he has a mold because he's made out of this soft plastic. And so, I mean, it looks great. The brain looks awesome. His tentacles all look really nice and they're all movable like that. I think that was way cool. So he's pretty good on that end. The paint was kind of 50-50. I love the pink color that he has, but his eye right there, it came off. And so I feel like that was kind of like, just kind of half-assed. It's not really there. Wasn't really happy with that. And it came off when I was trying to fit him inside his figure here, which I'll get to in a second. But otherwise, Krang's pretty awesome. He doesn't really have articulation other than putting him into his android. And, I mean, the soft plastic can do some, but not a lot. And otherwise, that's pretty much all you can about Krang. He's just a small little, almost like an accessory himself. His android, there's a little bit more too. So the sculpt with him, I do like his face sculpt. I think it looks great. I love his frown, his visor, and his hands look pretty cool. I like the detail there. Otherwise, it's pretty average. Nothing to brag about, nothing to really harp on. He's got some good detail work in his mechanical parts. His skin looks kind of gross, which I think is a good thing. As far as his paint, there's the typical spilling that goes on with these figures. Nothing too major, nothing all that noticeable. There's some parts, like right here on his leg, that you can kind of see some splotching on, but for the most part, it's pretty clean across, but not a lot of like, wow, look at this paint kind of thing going on. The articulation on this figure is pretty standard as well. I mean, his head can rotate 360 degrees. It's a little bit tight because of his shoulders. They're pretty bulky. His shoulder itself can actually rotate 360 degrees, but it can't be brought in or out. His elbow can rotate 360 degrees, and it can be brought out almost 90 degrees and in about 90 degrees. Now, he doesn't have a wrist joint, and on this arm that kind of makes it a problem because of where they placed his elbow joint. So in order for the elbow to look natural, it sits like this, but you can see it makes his hand look kind of weird. And in order for his hand to sit right, it kind of makes his elbow look weird. So that was odd, especially since on his other arm, his other elbow doesn't have any rotation, and it can only move this direction 90 degrees, just a little bit more than 90. The back, it gets blocked by that big plate, which, I mean, he's got that big gear there, so it kind of would make sense that he has limited mobility. But, I don't know. It would have been nice to have gotten some more articulation out of that. His legs can rotate 360 degrees on the hip joint and the knee joint. And they can be bent back like this and forward enough that he can actually sit down, which was nice. He doesn't have any ankle joints, which I always want ankle joints, but almost never get them with these less expensive figures. So the only accessory that really came with Krang was his android, or I guess the android came with Krang. Either way, the problem there is he doesn't actually fit into the stomach cavity. I mean, he does, but once you get him in there, he actually looks ridiculous, and it's not easy to get him in there. And that's how I damaged his eye, was trying to stuff him into this thing. And honestly, I think your best bet with him is to leave him kind of half out like that. I think that looks better than actually stuffing him in, because the plastic starts to leave all these gaps that you'll be able to see, whereas this just looks like he's kind of crawling out. And that was really disappointing. I kind of wish that it would have looked like it did in the packaging, where it was just his face and it was really smooth. But that was a no-go, and so this is kind of the best you get unless you want to take him out and have him just kind of there, or maybe you could figure out a way to get him like on his shoulder. But that's Crane's figure there, and he was pretty average other than a couple of disappointments, like not being able to fit Crane into the stomach cavity. But I mean, for the most part, he's pretty average, and we'll go ahead and just move on to Leonardo now. So here's Leo out of the package, and Leonardo was much better than Crane was, and we're going to go ahead and start off with his sculpt. If you look at his face, you can actually see his little nose holes, which is pretty cool, and this texture on his skin looks awesome. You can actually see the definition in his muscle, but it's not like too much, and it's pretty much like that across the board. Great detail work. Even in the legs, you can see they sculpted these leg wrappings really well, so you can see the skin underneath. Just fantastic work on the sculpt. Even the shell has really good details on it, and that's probably where they probably could have just gone the easy route, and they didn't. It's very textured. It stands out quite a bit. I really like the shell. Now, the paint, if you look here, there's no spillage from that bright blue onto that bright green, or vice versa, which is awesome. That would have been a really painfully obvious mistake to make. And even the whites in his eyes are very clean, and that's awesome. I really appreciate having great paint on these lower end figures. It doesn't happen very often, and it's awesome when it does. And the paint's like that, once again, all the way across the figure. It's very detailed, not a lot of spillage, except for maybe on the legs. There's a little bit of spilling over where the gray meets the green, but I would rather have them showing the green skin underneath than just taking the easy route and painting the whole thing gray. I think it looks really cool personally. And probably the worst is these sandals. You can see some black coming onto the brown straps, but that's pretty small, and you don't really see that very well. And overall, I think the paint looks fantastic, so no complaints here. His articulation, I will say be very careful with his head. His head pops right off, and it actually came off when I was pulling him out of the plastic, so be careful with that. Otherwise, it rotates 360 degrees. His shoulders rotate 360 degrees, and they come up like this. Now, his elbows also have 360 degree rotation, and they can come backwards almost 90 degrees, and then come forward 90 degrees. He does have wrist rotation, which is awesome for giving his arms like a natural look, unlike Crane, whose hand looks very odd if you try to line up his arm at all. His legs can rotate 360 degrees at the hip and the knee, and they can both come back almost to touch his shell, which I feel like if you're going to hang this figure, could give him some really cool ninja jumps and stuff like that. I think that'd be really cool for articulation, for posing and that kind of thing. And he can move his legs forward. He doesn't really sit very well, and the only reason why you can get him to sit is because his scabbards on the back kind of hold him up. And while that's not bad, it just doesn't really look very natural, but you can sit him with his knees bent, and it looks much better. Now, as far as accessories go, he's got his swords, and let me show you, his swords look great in his hands, and they stick very well. I was really happy with that accessory, considering it's a huge part of Leonardo. And one thing I'm really glad about is, unlike when I reviewed Ray here, her staff is all bent up, and it's kind of hard to get that thing fixed, whereas his sword is very straight, looks very good. I was very, very happy with that. One thing I did notice, though, is on the back of the packaging, you can see that the hilt was supposed to be blue, and it's obviously not blue. It's this gray color, and blue would have been much better. It's not a huge deal. I just, wish they would have had some consistency with their advertising there. So there's my review for these figures. Leonardo was amazing. I definitely suggest picking him up, even if you don't collect a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures. He's definitely worth it. Great figure. Crane, I wouldn't suggest. You can't fit him in his own Android, and everything else about him was pretty average. So I wouldn't suggest getting him. But let me know what you guys think in the comments.